Well, I have always drawn when I was very young, and I think I mostly get it from my grandfather, but also from my dad, because my dad he did like little paintings when I was a kid. But also my mother, it's like most of the kids, they had like a very Spanish sort of life, most of them. And I guess like for me, it was different for me, the fact that I was actually coming to London, because at the time like London was, it was before like the world became so global. Like going to London was still like going to this kind of like wacky place, where you could like have like, buy like wacky clothes and do all these weird things, so it was very special for me to have my uncle living in the UK and coming to London every summer. I was in my formative years. I was going to a place called the Círculo de Bellas Artes, which is a private foundation in Madrid. And the drawing that we did there, it was very kind of 19th century classical drawing. So I spent many years going there. I used to go there like after school, so like from 5 to 10 o'clock, and basically draw from the model. So I started drawing from the model fairly early, like probably when I was like 16 or 17. It was a strange place because it was like full of all these kind of like old painters that lived in Madrid, and it was just like a really weird sort of place for a young person to go to. And across the road, it was a place where it's still there, the Academia de San Fernando. There is a room at the back where you can find all of Goya's plates from the disasters of war. And I really spent a lot of time there, like studying Goya's etchings. And I think like Goya's work is really coming out now in my work after all these years. And in a very conscious way, I look at him. He has this kind of like, he has this humor and this tragedy that are always interwoven. They're always working together, and I think that that's really one of the aspects that you can see in my work. Is this? It's a mix of the tragic, the humorous, like in a way in which I always try to raise the attention of whoever is looking at the paintings by creating this uneasy feelings, if you like, where you don't know if what you are looking at is meant to be funny or is meant to be tragic, or it's almost like creating this ambiguity, which is a bit what life is for me. So I came to England to live with my uncle, who at the time was running a framing business for artists, and I worked with him for about a year, and then I basically got a flat in the East End, and a year later must have been, I went to study to the Royal Drawing School. I was actually found. I didn't actually apply for the course, so it was one of the people involved in the course at the time. They just saw some of my drawings, and they actually invited me to come. So it was a nice surprise. Yeah, it was really nice, and I had a really good time in the Royal Drawing School. It was just great because in a way I came back to drawing, but in a very different way. We were going out in the streets to draw from the streets in London, and we're going to museums, and again, somehow came back to work from the model, because when I came to the UK, I had this period where before I went to study there, I was actually like doing very free sort of work, a bit like the work I'm doing now. And then when I went to drawing school, everything got tight again. I think up to the point when I was 35, so when I started all this series of works, I think I lived with a conflict that I think it was an axis of 3 points, if you like. I think on the one hand I had I always had a very vivid imagination, so I was doing work that it was very imaginative. And I had this other axis, which is I've always been fascinated by classical painting. I just love classical painting, when I was in Spain, I was in love with Velázquez when I was a teenager. And when I came to the UK, obviously, I was in the National Gallery all the time, drawing from Titian and the masters. And then on the third, what you call the third axis, I was, as I said before, I studied graphic design, and I was very much involved with computers and graphics for periods in my life. So I think up to I was 35, I was really struggling to handle and to manage these three interests in my work. And I think at that point I got to the point where I managed to somehow put it all into this. I've managed to reduce the classical my classical paintings, somehow absorb them into a more imaginative work, and also the computer work and the graphics, somehow the compositional style, the speed of it, also manage it within this type of work, and then somehow let that imaginative drive that I've got manage to make it be free. It was actually very difficult to abandon that realistic style, and I lingered on into this kind of hybrid, weird style for a few years. And actually, what really helped me move on was the work I did with performance and video.
Well, I just really love myself. I love myself so much. You wouldn't believe it, please. I really love myself. There is nothing in this world I love more than me.
It was actually very liberating. It was a medium where you could say my heart wasn't there. So I could be very experimental. I could try many things. I could play with other people, with other artists, and it was a great experience. And it really helped me eventually to free myself from the classical paintings. I love music. I actually love classical music, and I always saw some of my work as composing, like a composer will make a symphony or a piano trio or whatever. I want to compose something. It's not at the end it becomes a totality, but it's made of parts, and these parts are composed. They are an artifact. They are an artifice. They are put together to convey an emotion, convey a message, to make visible something internal, something that I am thinking of, that I am processing, something that it is already in the world, but that is not represented that way. So one of the things I'm really interested in are heads. I can't escape it. The idea of developing a psychology for a character or for a person. I think in my work now, all the realistic aspect of depicting a face is gone, pretty much, because I don't think I need it to communicate what I want to say. But still, I retain a need to develop a state of mind, if you like, a position, a psychological position, perhaps. I'm very interested in, when I do heads, I'm very interested in reaching this point where you can read a particular psychological position, a particular disposition, a feeling, something that is particular to that character, to that person, to that moment. And normally I do a lot of studies of heads before actually getting into the big works. Generally not of the other bits, but the heads I can't just make a big painting and get on with the head in the big painting. Somehow it always requires more of my attention. The beginning of a painting for me is very much about drawing the same subject again and again, with transformations and variations, until I reach a sort of consistency within the subject. When the subject becomes, every time I do a drawing, the subject somehow stays in the same place, if you like. So I think when in the studio I go through waves of being super messy to moments where I need to really clean everything. So I go through these waves of like extreme chaos to, you know, obsessive cleaning, really. I think the chaos really coincides with the points where I am developing a large piece, and I just somehow let the whole thing just accumulate, or whatever is happening in the studio. And normally I will do a massive clean at the very end after I finish, to kind of like prep for the next piece. I really see a painting as it's something that you catch in the moment, even though you've been working on a subject for a while. To be honest, some paintings, they never really happen because the subject, when I'm drawing, sort of disintegrates and it just doesn't make sense. So this painting behind is very much about, I would say essentially that is about an anxiety, a particular kind of anxiety. I think, you know, you can look at the characters and think, oh, this character is this, or this character is that. But I think in most of my work, when I'm trying to transfer, is always a kind of an emotion or a feeling or a state of mind. And this painting is very much about what is happening now in the UK. How I feel my situation is as a European in London, and also what I see in other people, how people are reacting to what is happening. It has some elements that are coming from another painting I did a couple of years ago, which was like, it was a crumbling castle on an island, and it was very much the beginning of this sort of subject, and it was a painting kind of in between the black and white style that I had like 4 or 5 years ago and the very colorful stuff that I'm doing now. I want my work to deliver whatever my thoughts are on politics. I don't want to be the channel that talks for those politics, if you know what I mean. Because I think like once even if I have something political to say or something that is, that is going to touch on certain issues that are social, I think like once these ideas enter the work, they somehow become universal ideas, if you like. And although they probably support the way I see the world, they are not like political statements per se, but they are more like commentaries on human folly, if you like. It was necessary for me to explore both the Spanish and the British culture, through reading, in order to develop a subject that I could engage with in my painting. So this really happened like in the last 4 years, where I consciously took a step further and took the risk of including historical subjects in my work, and all, with the intention of understanding really who I am. The work I wanted to make was coming from within. So there was a conflict there, and I didn't know how to resolve it. To me, the end of that conflict was, I don't need to reproduce the world. But then at the same time, when you paint something from within, you are reproducing the world. You see? You are actually creating an image of the world, but not by putting a mirror against the wall, but by becoming a filter of it, if you like. A painting simply ends. Not the painting itself, but my engagement with the painting ends. And that's a feeling. I feel it. This is the end for me. I don't need to carry on with it. Once I start the big paintings, I think that, of course, there are accidents happening along the way, but the route is already been traced. I know where I'm going. That's why I prepare a lot. I know the subject. I know what I'm painting. And then it's all a question of walking towards that end.